The experts that best communicate their culture and their vision to their potential clients are those entrepreneurs that we remember. I'm Shelby Jo Long with the Expertise Podcast, and here we explore the stories of those entrepreneurs to inspire you to think about how you can monetize your expertise. Hello, everybody. I'm Shelby Jo Long. Welcome to the Expertise Podcast, where we explore the entrepreneurs that have created businesses from their expertise and the foundation of their expertise. And I bring experts onto the entrepreneurs and experts onto this podcast to be able to talk about that journey and tell their story to help inspire listeners to think about creating businesses out of their own expertise. And this week, I'm featuring members of the group, the Strategic Advisor Board. And the Strategic Advisor Board is this very powerful 10-person think tank that gets together to create strategic solutions for small businesses. It's a very interesting and unique organization that I happen to be a part of, and that my colleague Michael Sipe is a part of too. And this is the opportunity for me to be interviewed as an expert on the Expertise Podcast. So Michael, thank you for coming on today to conduct my interview. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, Shelby Jo. And I think as one of the partners on the team of 10 on the Strategic Advisor Board, it's good to get to know each other a little bit better. Absolutely. And I'm actually really looking forward to finding out more about your business, how you came about getting that, because your story is pretty unique and where you came from to get to where you are today. And so I'd like to dive into that a little bit more and explore that. So sure. How about we start off with you telling us and our listeners a little bit about where you started in from a business perspective and why you liked doing that back then, and then where you're going with that today.
From the business perspective, I would say it started in a few different places. So I've been in academics. I've been in academia for 15 years. I teach business communication and organizational communication, everything human communication centered, nothing technology centered. But I teach all of those human communication elements, and I was inspired to start a business to apply some of those theories and everything I tell 18 to 22-year-old students to do in their lives and their businesses. And I was inspired to create a business outside of that. So very similar to the work that you do with business culture, I'd done quite a few seminars and outside interactions and trainings and organizations that had to do with culture and gender and communication and even public speaking training, those kinds of trainings. So that started on and off a while ago. And I really enjoyed being involved with organizations. I enjoyed being a part of that. And then in the past year and a half, about 18 months, I've really taken that to a different level where I help kind of digging into my own expertise and identifying the pieces that very much resonate with me. I like the business culture piece a lot, and that's a different arm of my business. But the thing that I really like to do is and thing that is very second nature to me is developing programs and developing lesson plans and putting together speeches and all of these different ideas to be able to best connect and teach an idea to an audience. And that's what I do is very meta. I help people put together programs, their own programs for their businesses to help better leverage their knowledge and what they have so they can have higher ticket coaching programs within their own businesses. And that resonates with the coaching and the speaking and communication piece of that, because that's really where businesses are trying to have more of an online presence, be able to leverage the material that they have to be able to add more value to their clients. And they can do that through this higher ticket coaching programs or just programs to help educate their audience. So that's where that's the brief background to my business over the past couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's great. And that's fascinating too, because you're taking a discipline of teaching, of learning, and actually applying that And what we find so often in academia today is professors talking about concepts or ideas and teaching it, but then not getting out in the real world and actually living it. So one, commend you for being able to take your concepts and ideas that you've been obviously an expert on the past 15 years in academia, but then taking it and making your own business out of it. So that's really phenomenal. So tell us a little bit too about what makes the culture piece so unique and so interesting to you, and how you might integrate that into a program for people, coach or consultant or team that's looking to have an online educational experience.
Sure. And I think it speaks almost directly into when you have an online program, when you have something to engage your audience, the culture is the communication pieces of it, and how those concepts are articulated to your audience, and how you want to empower your audience to take their own steps and motivate that audience. And so much of that has to do with the delivery of the material, and then also the feedback loop that's created. And there's the communication professor in me. There's got to be that feedback loop, right? That it's not something static, that emotion that I'm trying to create to empower you to make differences or change or speak about your own product differently. It's got to resonate with your audience. And if it doesn't resonate with your audience, then there's that disconnect. So culture takes so many different forms, but I think there's a culture in the delivery and the engagement of that too. So a lot of my clients take their programs, and not only, you don't just develop the program and sell it online as a course, you do that, but then the encouraged engagement beyond that, and the one-on-one piece to go with it. And I have a mastermind component to it too, that adds to that. The culture of growth and the culture of that engagement is really important for me and how I look at that engagement.
Yeah, well, that's sounds like the necessary components to actually give a learning program life. So, right. So we all have been through school, and you can think back to like a boring teacher one had, or a boring subject one had. And so when you talk to clients, customers for your programs, obviously they come to you with the idea that, hey, I've got an interesting topic, I've got an interesting idea, or I've got an interesting thing that I teach. But what I really was keyed in on was the feedback piece, to be able to create that dialogue, to create the community within there, so that learning isn't stale, it isn't drudgery, it's actually something fun. So what are some examples of some fun things, or some ways to create enthusiasm about coursework that you've seen that do really well at bringing and creating engagement within the learning environment?
Well, I'll talk about an example from my teaching, and then I'll talk about what I do in the expertise project. But what I teach public speaking, and I teach small group communication, and which are probably the two most hated classes in college across the board, right? Because people really don't like to speak in front of an audience. It's kind of an anxiety. People don't really like that. I have a strange affiliation that I love to be in front of an audience, and that probably has to do with my background too. But then in small group communication, people also don't like to work within groups. And I think that's a product of, this online environment where we can solve all these problems and do everything on our own. And I can look at Google to find an answer, to find a direction. I don't have to talk to anybody else to do that. So I think there's an affiliation against that. And I've made both of those classes much more performance. They are performance-based classes, of course, because you have to speak in front of an audience, but we try to add that feedback loop in the class too, by having people be involved by asking questions, or having them lead small group projects and conversations. And I think that makes it more fun. Same thing with small group, is that all semester long, it's constant engagement and problem solving in the group, because that's the fun piece of it. And then you break down the barriers, and people are solving those problems together. And that's really key for it. There is nothing like working in a small group, and there's the conversation's typically great if it's a good topic and you have good leadership and all that. But the amount of problem solving and the amount of value that you can have in a group discussion where the ideas build upon each other is just amazing. So I took that idea and I created a mastermind group with my clients. If you're a client of mine, then you're part of this mastermind group. And we talk about a certain topic every week. Like the topic we talked about last week was your brand and an emotional connection to your audience. And that was what we started with. And then everybody talked about ways that they could do that in their own coaching programs or in their own ideas. And the great thing about that is that, and similar to what you and I experience in the Strategic Advisor Board, there's so many different ideas there to solve problems and to maybe try something else before you launch it. You know, there's a power of that small group atmosphere because there's a diversity of perspectives, and you know, the diversity in age and the diversity in industry, those give you some really unique background and experience for that. So that helps create that feedback loop. And I think as a business owner, as being a business owner is pretty humbling, because your idea that you write in your business plan doesn't usually work. So you have to be able to be flexible and have some feedback and move and the micro pivot to be able to succeed. And I think the small group environment allows for that, and it contributes to that. So that's kind of a very long-winded example of where I use those concepts. So.
Well, sure. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Is you can solve it individually, or you can try to solve it with a really large group. Yeah. And depending upon how one takes those inputs can drive the solution. But more often than not, it's the small groups that are thinking together. And if you think of, for example, about Amazon, you know, when they have a new product or an idea, they have the pizza teams, right? I don't know if you've heard about it, but the pizza teams are just 5 people kind of getting together and brainstorming on an idea and sort of beta testing it within the group to see, hey, will this work? And they all come from, like you said, diverse backgrounds within the company to see if it's something that would resonate and actually go to the next level. So when you're creating your mastermind, one, obviously it's great to have feedback from everybody else, but also in your coursework, it sounds like that you're also creating that environment where it's a small group setup and that you can all provide feedback in the learning process to make it engaging, especially on the topics that maybe might not be so interesting. How accurate is that?
Absolutely. I mean, who wants to talk about their CRM and having, you know, they talk with their customers and what emails they send? But the other kind of benefit is that you can learn from the successes and you can learn from the failures. And you know, if you're a newer business owner and you're testing out your ideas, I mean, one key part of the process, if you put together a program or a course, you have to validate it somewhere. And you've got to validate your idea before you launch a course. That's just is a very smart thing to do. So you don't launch your program and then it's not validated and then it fails. But that's almost a small piece of the validation process is in that group, because then you can talk about maybe those ideas might not work so well and maybe those ideas will work. I'll talk about just my own example. I have 3 online courses, online programs. And the first one that I did was the Thriving Entrepreneur Program. And that was about a year ago, right when the pandemic started, I launched it. So not the best time to launch a business. But what I did learn through it, I did have the beta test of it. I did take a group of people through it, but my videos were super long and I had PowerPoints, and it was very academic. I'm not trying to demonize academia, but it was very pinpointed, like I'm teaching a lesson and you have to know all this material. And so much was, when I got through that course, that was 8 weeks with those 30 to 40-minute videos, I was like, I'm asking people to invest a lot of time to focus their energy and learn about it, but I'm not giving them enough agency to do these things in their own business. So that completely transformed the way that I did my second program, which my videos are no longer than like 8 to 10 minutes. And here's some action items that you can do within your own business to help be more clear or to help put your idea to the test or whatever that is. So there was such a benefit in that beta test to me and that feedback group that I had that helped me change to a better product. And then that resonated and has done very well. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's off and running based off of testing it. Yeah, well, that's great. And the learning process for you was here's all this material that you want to get out there, but then at the same time, there's the element of, well, how much of it's going to sink in, and then how much interest is there going to be, and so you found the balance for that. To create that learning environment where there's some stuff to learn, but there's also the application of it. And I think that's what people really want, right? Is they want the ability to come in, learn something new, but then not just put it on the shelf and think about it 2 years from now, but to actually go and use it the next day or use it that very day. And so when one develops a program and you've been an expert on it, but now you're able to take that communication background and go, hey, for you as a coach, what is your material and how can you create an environment where people love what they're getting from you and that they're feeling engaged with it, that they're feeling like it provides value, and oh, by the way, they're contributing a lot, and now you've built a community around it. So I commend you for being able to pull all that together and provide that resource for people. I think that's so much needed because so many courses, as we've seen, don't have that dynamic feature to them.
No, it's a lot of giving out a lot of information but not a lot of interaction with that information. And that's where, a lot of business, like you see a lot of people with online courses now, and that engagement piece, I think, is a critical component of it. So
yeah, good. Well, speaking of engagement, and I think a good segue to talk a little bit about here is, as a partner on the Strategic Advisor Board, there's 10 of us that come together that come up with solutions for small businesses. And we each of us bring our own unique perspective and background. And so perhaps you could share a little bit with us about how your view on small groups and small group solutions can be applied to the small business owner or the startup or the CEO who's been running their business for a while. How can they, from a communication perspective and from a small group perspective, gain some of the value of a small group and even an advisory group that's a small group?
Well, I have been, the concept of the Strategic Advisor Board is so awesome to me because there's 10 of us and 10 different experts and CEOs with their own background, their own expertise. The combined experience that we have in that group is tremendous. And you have somebody to help you with technology, somebody to help you with finance. You do the work in the culture piece, the put together program, whatever there is. There's so many different, it's a diversity of opinion that comes together to help create the best strategy for the business going forward. And I feel like I'm repeating myself from last episode, but I think that's the power in it, is that there's that dynamic of we're all together to help find the best strategy and best solution. And the rapid revenue piece, I think, of the model is really interesting, and that to create revenue to support those changes and to support those pivots that you have, I think that's a really unique offer and differentiating factor that we have. And the fact that we do it in a group, and yes, we've had some lengthy discussions, but that's all part of it. And it's really fun to be able to be a part of that. I don't probably won't talk about this too much, but one kind of piece of my background that it really feeds and that I really love is that I've been a college debate coach for 17 years, and I competed for 4, and I competed overseas. I love debate, and I love the quickness of debate, and I love the immediate response, and I love it's like a microcosm of problem solving that you have to do. You have a 7-minute speech to give to respond and to make your points and to win the arguments, and people are asking questions, and it's just this constantly dynamic environment. And being in a group like the Strategic Advisor Board kind of feeds that need for me, because very smart people, great conversations, so much authority in the room, and we're all elevated by everybody else's experience, because that's what we're trying to do, is create the best solution. And I just find that, and we do have, and the conversation, yes, we do spend time, but the conversations are fast, and we look at all these things and how they develop on each other, and it just really connects with that piece of my background that I really enjoy. So that's kind of which has everything to do with persuasion and strategy and problem solving that I really enjoy as a part of the strategic advisor board too. So.
Yeah, it would make sense that the debate, the persuasion, and the strategy to come up with solutions really fits your wheelhouse. And I think you highlighted something that's pretty unique, is that when once a business owner and they're looking for advice, typically you go to one source and get the one answer. And so there might be an opportunity to ask a question and go, hey, I'm not so sure about that idea. But when you have, in this case, 10 people that come with advice, there's a pretty strong probability that they've already talked about or debated what the solution might be to include. And what's great about it is everybody's open to the dialogue. And so that when a business owner comes to the Strategic Advisor Board group for advice, guess what? They're actually a participant in that dialogue. They're not a receiver, they're actually a participant. And so it does require one to be thinking on their feet, being quick about coming up with ideas. But I think the beauty of it is that it's not one person giving one answer. It's 10 people coming up with a collective answer. And now it's 11 people because they've now teamed as a partner with that CEO or business owner. So maybe you could share a little bit from your perspective, but that's what I'm observing, and how the debate experience you've had directly translates into coming up with solutions.
Absolutely. And I think that is also something that is differentiating and definitely a key piece of the Strategic Advisor Board, is that it's not a consultant coming in and giving you a report. It's that you're going to maybe use, but it's actually strategies that you can implement in your business in the short term. But we can't implement those strategies unless we know where you are as a business. And so it's partnering with the businesses and figuring out if that's the best solution to move forward. I think that is the key differentiator. And then those two different phases of solutions that we have, we look at the short-term piece and then we look at the long-term piece, and it's an extended engagement. Change does not happen overnight. Change happens over time. And very significant change can happen over time. And I think that's what the partnership piece is all about. And I think that's a really unique piece. The thing about the group problem solving too is that not everybody's going to agree with you. Or if you're a business owner and you go in and you have this idea, and I'm a business owner too, and I know how I want my business to go, but being open and having partners that are all there with you to not necessarily push you in the right direction, but to give you options of what to do. And then you act upon them. There's a lot to be learned from not an adversarial perspective, but there's a lot to be learned from those that agree with you and understand where you are, but then those that have experience on the other side of that too. So, I think that just that whole dynamic of group problem solving is just benefit for all of us, but it's particularly a benefit for the businesses that partner with us.
Yeah, that makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. And as you talked about a little bit too, is the expertise each of the board members bring. Maybe we could talk a little bit now too about, what kind of expertise do you feel, or passion do you feel that your expertise would have for these business owners, and how you would role play in that regard with the Strategic Advisor Board?
Sure. With my own background, my own expertise.
Yes, your own background, because we talked a little bit about it already before, but I think there's some uniqueness that from a communication perspective that kind of gets lost in translation. Like, we have a great idea, the CEO has a vision, but they're not able to communicate it, for example. Right. And so your background can tease that out. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because that is your expertise.
Sure. I'll talk about it from two perspectives. So the branding perspective from one, I think, is, having a clear identification. And I've gone through this process multiple times, and business owners that are successful have gone through this process multiple times to figure out who their ideal client is and who their target audience is, where they're going to market. Like, it happens many different times in the process. but a lot of it comes back to your offer. So what problem are you solving and how are you solving it? And then the other piece where I help people put together programs to further monetize and leverage what they already have. We all solve problems. How can you create a community out of that? How can you create a different offer that adds more value to your client, puts them into a community? And yes, it's a higher ticket item, but it provides so much more value to them that it just creates more opportunity for them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's there's an opportunity to step back from your business and think about what are some different ways that I can impact my clients. And I think now that, the pandemic, I think, sped up the process that was going to happen for all businesses. Everybody's forced to have an online presence. We're all doing Zoom interviews. We're, this is where business exists. The pandemic just sped it up. But nothing is more important now than businesses having that online presence and having that extra reach out to engage with their audience. Mm-hmm. And whether it's to training or just walking people through who is a part of their program and who is a part of their business, and creating that connection. And that has everything to do with your brand too, because brand's all about creating trust. So how do I create that trust loop initially? And a lot of that comes with your extended engagement for the offer that you have. So I'm not saying everybody could use it, but I think it's something that every business needs to worry about their brand and what they're saying about themselves online. But I think there's an opportunity that every business has, whether you are a plumbing company or whether you're a real estate company or whether you're a business coach, to be able to take your expertise and deliver it in a different way to your audience for more money. So,
yeah, how do you monetize that expertise? And it all comes down to communication. And you obviously have that background and you're ready to share on how to do that.
I am. I'm excited. It's when I met Jason Miller, our CEO, that was a time where the expertise project fits very well, and I have it very well with authors that want to use their book as we take your book and we create a high-end coaching program out of it, which is a very nice transition because you already have that expertise, you already have that knowledge that's out there, it's published. So how do you leverage that and create something that's going to create you more money? Because selling books is probably not going to make you a ton of money, but if you leverage your ideas in that book, it will make you a lot of money.
Sure.
So that can be in a few different ways. It's not just with books, but it's with what you can offer in your business.
Exactly. Very good. Well, any final thoughts or ideas you'd like to share about the Strategic Advisor Board or your business?
The Strategic Advisor Board, I'm just so excited to be a part of it. Such an amazing group to be in. And I'm excited to see what the future holds with the Strategic Advisor Board. I'm excited to get to know everybody more. All of those things are just really, we're at a really fun stage of that. And I'm really excited about it. For my own business, I would just say, when I started the Expertise Project, I launched it in November of last year. My focus was to help academics create a different stream of revenue for their business. Like you don't have to be an academic to create something out of your expertise. If you're a business owner, you have expertise, you have processes, you have intellectual property that can easily be transformed into a different stream of revenue for your business. And don't be afraid to think outside of the box about that, because you can monetize your expertise in a different way. So yeah, that's what
great. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, a lot of good challenges there. And thank you for sharing that. I also want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you and learn a little bit about your background and where you support people and how you do that. And also how we as teammates are there to help people scale and grow their business quickly. And it's with a process that's been in play for a number of years now. It's not a new process. It's a process that's been there for a while. So
absolutely.
All that being said, Shelby Jo, thank you for letting me interview, and great to be on the Expertise Podcast. And hopefully our listeners and viewers got a little something out of that.
Yes. And I want to thank you for coming on to be interviewed earlier and coming on to interview me. it's kind of nice to be the interviewee. So I hope that that listeners got something out of this expertise podcast, and we can help inspire you to create a business from your expertise. And we'll see you next time.
Yes, next time.
Thanks. Let's see. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Expertise Podcast, and hope you're inspired to think about how to further monetize the expertise and the processes that you have in your own business. See you next time.